this week I have a very, very special guest. It's a titan in the fintech industry in Asia. It's Danny Levy. How are you, Danny?
I'm good, Ranvir. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for being willing to do the show. I really appreciate your time and your interest in taking part in this show.
No, absolutely. Happy to help.
Yeah, so of course, we know each other well. We've
hmm
we've met at one of the big events in the fintech world, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But just in case some of the listeners are not really sure about who you are, why don't you tell the listeners about yourself? Who is Danny Levy?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, as you said, my name's Danny Levy. I've lived here in Singapore. I'm based in Singapore. I've lived here for 13 years. So I moved over from London in 2010 and was working for a UK B2B events business
Hmm.
and had been working there for 4 or 5 years, and one day got kind of pulled into a room over there and offered the opportunity to come out to Singapore. And having lived in London for about 7 years, Googled Singapore and Sentosa Island popped up and all the sun and the sand, and I thought, why not? And I moved out with my then fiance, now wife, to Singapore. We both worked together actually, and we started
Okay.
that company up out in Singapore. We did that for a year or so before going on to another business in the kind of security and CBRN, defense, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive space are quite different.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and we did consulting and events for them. And then after that, did that for a few years. I joined another UK B2B events business called Worldwide Business Research.
Okay.
And I helped grow that business from just a handful of people to around 60 staff when I left last year after 10 years, and got the company through the pandemic and launched some new business lines in the kind of digital space, doing
Yeah.
one-to-one meetings. We launched a kind of market insights business. And I left last year to join a company called Money 2020, as you mentioned,
Hmm.
and really exciting opportunity. So Money 2020, we organized the kind of the leading, I would say, the kind of the highest pedigree FinTech or money show in the world. And it's
Yeah.
really a very unique experience. So most B2B trade shows are in a very large concrete hall and they pack them with stands, and you walk down in straight lines, and you get sold out by kind of different companies, and maybe there's some stages on the side, and it's all about how many kind of stands you can fit in the hall. So Money 2020 is completely different.
Yes.
We set the hall up. So in Bangkok next year, where the show's taking place in April, we've got about 24,000 square meters at the Queen Sirikit National Convention Centre. But a large portion of that show floor, I would say more than a third, is on the stages. It's on our kind of features, experiential
Hmm.
experiences on site on the show floor. So in the US this year, we've got Money Motor Circuit. Last year, we had a very large drone activation. In
Right.
Europe this year, we had a giant robot called the Money Bot that walked around, a merchandise
Okay.
machine. The stages are super cool, very funky, very high production value.
Hmm.
So the event is a lot of fun, and then we run amazing kind of industry nights and networking parties. So it's just a load of fun, and obviously you're learning a lot and doing meetings in our connections lounges where there's thousands of meetings that take place through the app. But really the idea is that delegates come, they have a whole heap of fun, which is
Hmm.
really important, and they leave feeling really inspired after
Yeah.
making tons of connections. And I decided to move over because it's just very unique in the kind of world of large scale B2B events. And Money 2020 looks at it very differently. And we have creative directors internally that kind of spend their days just kind of coming up with new and amazing ideas of how to kind of push the show to the next level. And that's just
Hmm.
a really fun environment to work in. So yeah, me myself, I've worked in kind of leadership roles out here in Singapore for the past 13 years and managed lots of different people, lots of different personalities, and kind of work across different departments, so production, content, editorial,
Hmm.
sales, operations, marketing. So really kind of a
Yeah, you
jack of
do
all
it all, right?
trades. And I've also
Yeah.
worked in all these departments as well, having done startups. So you've really got to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and, be talking to customers and be out there. And I'm doing all
Yes.
of that again now at Money 2020. And no, I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy finding good people and then getting the best out of them and kind of helping them unlock their potential. So yeah, that's a little bit
Yeah.
about me and my career background.
Yeah, sounds like it's come full circle for you, now that you're going back to do all of these things that helped you start your career in the first place before you got into the leadership roles. But yeah, as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
we met at the Money 2020, introduction event, should we call it that, in Thailand last year.
Yeah,
And I think,
we run
mhm,
kind of, they're called world tours. So we identify kind of key fintech hubs around the world, but then also in Asia, feeding into the large show that will happen in Bangkok next April. And the idea is
yes,
that they're kind of key brand building exercises. So we go in, we find a really cool venue. So in Bangkok, it was at the Standard Hotel, which is a really
yeah,
nice space. It's little bit similar to like a W type hotel. We
yeah,
run some really high level content on a pertinent topic that's important to that
hmm,
market, and it's hot in terms of the current moment in time. And then we open it up to networking. So around 200 to 300 kind of fintech movers and shakers come to each one of these, and that's where
yeah,
we connected in April. I guess that was more like the kickoff event, really, because it was like the year countdown to the larger
yes.
show in Bangkok.
Yeah, I mean it was unbelievable. And as you said, Standard Hotel's like part of the Mahanakhon complex, which is the tallest building in Thailand. So probably the marquee location to launch in Thailand. But I think the big question is why Thailand, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
fintech and all of these industries are also really popular in places like Indonesia, and Malaysia. So, why Thailand? Why not Jakarta? Why not, Kuala Lumpur?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many choices, isn't there, in Asia, given how large it is. It's always makes me chuckle when people say Asia and, kind of
Yes,
band it together because each country's so different and
yes.
has their own kind of unique history. And you just can't treat each country the same, right? Everyone's just so different. Um,
Hmm.
we actually ran the show previously. We did run it in Singapore in 2018 and 2019 at the
Hmm.
Marina Bay Sands, and the show was good. It was well received. Then the pandemic happened, and we couldn't run it in 2020. And although we brought the shows back in Amsterdam in 2021 and in Las Vegas in 2021, the pandemic restrictions in Asia were just too difficult in terms of
Yeah.
being able to bring the shows back. They were very very rigid, and so really the earliest we could bring it back was 2024 because we'd also lost the team that was here previously in Singapore, so we had to hire a completely new team, including myself, who moved over from
Yeah.
WBR. And the company, though, spent those years doing a lot of research, actually. So we did a lot of internal research and we looked across the region. We looked at hubs, again, like Singapore, like Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur. And what we found was that in the research we did, um, when we ask a closed question, a lot of people would say Singapore. But if you asked an open question and you gave them the choice, Singapore, Bangkok, or Kuala Lumpur, for example, overwhelmingly it was Bangkok as the choice for Money 2020. And I think there's two real reasons there. In that
Yeah.
It's a fun place. People like to go. There's lots to do. People go back again and again, right? Great shopping. It's very vibrant. You can have a good time. It's a destination location, which is very similar to the other events that we run. So um, the European and the US events do not happen in the financial hub. The Europe event happens in Amsterdam, not London, and the US event's in Las
Yes.
Vegas, not New York. So again,
Hmm.
similar here, right? It's in Bangkok and not say Singapore or Hong Kong. And the second reason is that we say that it's the place where money does business, right? So people come into this event. I mentioned how fun it is, but people get a lot of business done at the show. And again,
Right.
if you've got a captive audience in a location like Bangkok,
Hmm.
where people are are really there for the show. That makes a huge difference to the on-site experience for everyone, for the delegates, for the sponsors, for the speakers. It's just far more fruitful when people are there and people are serious, and you have to buy a ticket to come to the show as well. It's not a free to attend show, so people are senior, people are very serious. And
Hmm.
lastly, I would say the venue. So we also looked at a lot of venues across the
Mm.
region, across Southeast Asia,
Yeah,
and the Queen.
QSNCC is
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
it's amazing, right? So they just
Yeah.
finished renovating. Actually, I think it was end of last year when the renovation finished, and it's a
Yes, that's
really
right.
stunning venue. And we like to have everything in the one hall: our stages, our activations, our networking, our booths, and this allows us to do that. So we've got the whole ground floor at the Queen Sirikit, halls 1 to 4, as I said, about 24,000 square meters. It's really beautiful. And then
Yeah.
one level up on level 1 there, we've got all of the meeting space taken for our partners. We've got rooms there where we'll be running private summits away from the main stages.
Hmm.
Our industry night, kind of networking evening on the first night, is at the plenary hall on the first floor. And then we've got a long-term view, right? So we've actually committed already to a 3-year contract, and there's good opportunities there to grow in future
Okay.
years if we want to expand the show. So that's really why we've picked
Yeah.
and settled on Bangkok as our kind of short and longer term home as we grow this show in Asia.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully, hearing that, there's a 3-year contract that'll inspire some new founders and that'll inspire existing people in fintech or insurtech or whatever to, try and grow their business and think about investing in Thailand or opening in Thailand or, just engaging in the economy and the ecosystem here. Because as you
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
it's a great business destination. It is
it
where money
is.
does
We
business. But
we've also been
yeah,
very warmly welcomed by the Thai authorities. I should mention that as well. That
right.
so we're working with the DEPA, we're working with NIA in Thailand,
Hmm.
TSEB, and also the organizations like the Bank of Thailand have been very welcoming as well. We
Hmm.
had them speak at our Amsterdam show, and they've hosted us when we've been over. So yeah, really supportive. And the other reason as well is from, I guess, from a content standpoint. Making sure we have a show that's really representative of the region. So we want to have a show that's for Asia and by Asia, and
Yes.
gives the region a voice. Gives companies the opportunity to talk about and celebrate some of the achievements, and the fact that in Asia now a lot of world firsts are coming out of this part of the world. Right, it's really a hotbed of innovation for
Yes.
fintech, and we feel that Thailand's very representative of Southeast Asia. So things like underbanked, that's a big issue in Thailand and across the region. But in more advanced financial hubs like Singapore, that's not an issue.
Hmm.
So we feel it's representative. And then in terms of world first, so there was the prompt pay cross border payment between Thailand and Singapore, for example, which was a world first coming out of
Yes.
Thailand, in partnership with Singapore. So again, we just feel that it's really got everything we need in terms of content, setup, location. It's going to work really well, and we're super excited about bringing this to life next year.
Yeah, it's exciting for us as well. I'm sure
Yeah,
that all people in Asia and in Thailand are going to be really looking forward to attending this event. But yeah, just to scope out a little bit and talk about fintech in general. What
yeah.
do you think are some of the most exciting trends that we have today? And maybe what are some of the trends you hope to see in 2024, particularly in the Asia region?
Um, I think when you say fintech, right? I mean, it's such
Hmm.
a broad
Yeah,
space, isn't it? Right? I mean, there's
definitely.
so much that goes on in there. I mean, it's kind of financial technology, and what might be exciting to us might not be exciting to someone else because they might have a specific focus on, say,
Yeah.
RegTech or blockchain technology, and you might be interested in something different, right? Maybe it's real time payments, and so I
Yes.
think I think for us, what we want to do at the show is make sure that we have that quite balanced across the event, and so we're not trying to tie ourselves to any one kind of trend or topic. because there's just so much exciting innovation happening in the fintech space. I think it would be unfair for me to name one or two things when
Okay.
actually there's a lot of huge innovation. So
Yeah.
for us, what we've done actually is we've identified three big themes that we
Yeah.
feel are really exciting in the fintech space for next year. And what we're doing is we're attaching topics to that for the show. So one I already mentioned, which is eastward expansion. So from the
Hmm.
research we've done, again, I mentioned it earlier, but we are finding that so many world firsts are happening here now, coming out of the region, whether it's Southeast Asia, North Asia, innovations in blockchain technology, clearly on the kind of social media side, the super
Hmm.
apps in this part of the world, like WeChat, they're far and ahead above where the Western apps and super apps would be at the moment, right? In
Yes,
terms of the payments
definitely.
integration, the chat integration, the real time shopping, so it's making sure that we can showcase all of these innovations at the show, right? That
Hmm.
we're putting that front and center, and we've got speakers and topics that cover that. Again, the second kind of big theme that we're covering is on virtualization. So within
Okay.
that, it's things like NFTs, the metaverse, blockchain technology. So really looking at that kind of new disruptive tech that's
Yeah.
coming through. And why we've said virtualization is because we think it's moved on now from digitization. So actually, it's becoming very integrated into our lives. So if you look at things like embedded finance, for
Right.
example, you often don't even know that it's there when you're on an app or you know using your day-to-day tools. It's now so integrated that you
Hmm.
almost take it for granted, right? Or
Yeah.
if you're on
For
Revolut
sure.
now, right, and you want to kind of Revolut Singapore offers like trading functionality, for example. So it's embedded finance. So things
Yeah.
like that, looking at metaverse and Web3 are still clearly big in North Asia and other parts of Asia. So we'll be bringing in key topics and themes under that. And the last one is on kind of cross border and harmonization. So
Hmm.
looking at Asia, looking at regulation, looking at how progressive things that are there and what's coming through, and how countries are working together and innovating and pushing the region on. So
Hmm.
they're the kind of big themes that we've got for the show. Um, and yeah, there's just so much going on, right, in this part of the world. It's really exciting. Things on crypto as well, right? As new regulations come in, we want to
Yeah.
keep a close eye on that as well. So, yeah, really exciting time to be in the industry. And I can't say too much because on the content side, we're just closed our call for content. So
Okay.
we're working now on kind of finalizing how the agenda and how the speakers are going to look for release early next year. But very, very
Okay.
exciting.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. No worries, not forcing you for an exclusive or anything. It's all well and good. But yeah, no, I mean, as you said, super exciting times, and these three key themes, I think, having listened to them, are definitely very representative of,
Hmm.
of Asia and of the way that people are thinking here. And I think what makes us very different from the Western part of the world is that we have a propensity for innovation. I think that's very built in, right?
Hmm.
It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, you either have to go and learn how to innovate and then you will innovate, or you don't, right?
Yeah.
For us, it's like, no, innovation is a must, right?
Hmm.
Whatever you do, you got to do it better. And
Yeah.
it could be because we've got a lot of countries here that have the resources like Korea or China or India, right? That are shifting the boundaries of what's possible in any and every industry. So if places like Thailand and Indonesia and Philippines and other places in Southeast Asia either don't adopt those technologies or catch up and make our own, we're going to get left behind real quick.
Hmm.
So I think that propensity for innovation also makes it a really exciting place to do business.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah, and you can't deny, right? The future of kind of tech and advancement, innovation, fintech. It's in Asia. Asia is the place
Definitely.
to be, and yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of the region, right, in the next kind of few years. I'm sure there'll be innovations and new developments we can't imagine right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also interesting to ask you is that do you ever have people from the Money 2020 events that take place in Europe or North America or wherever else you've hosted these world tour events, like
Mhm.
even in Sao Paulo last year. Have you ever had like people from these events attending the ones in other regions or in Asia? And have they, said certain observations that have, been, close to your mind about what they've noticed and what they think is really cool about certain places, or what kind of brings the world's finance environment together?
You mean when we go into these different hubs in terms of the learnings that we take away from the different hubs? So
Yes,
yeah,
or
yeah,
like audience learnings that maybe you don't realize because you're so into it. So like
yeah.
a third person comes and tells you like, oh, like Danny, something in, Thailand is very similar to how we do things in Sao Paulo, for example.
Mhm.
Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, we pick locations just using Asia again, but for this year, it was kind of like really getting the word out, right? That the show
Hmm.
is here, and we've picked the kind of I guess a lot of the most mature fintech hubs. We've gone to Singapore, we've gone to Sydney, we're in Hong Kong next. For next year, again, without giving too much away in terms of where we're exactly going, but we're looking at locations where maybe they're a little bit more inward looking in terms
Okay.
of, and actually traveling out to shows like Money 2020 is not maybe the norm. They'd normally be at events in their own countries where they speak their local language. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's important to go in and let them know about us. But I think to your point, we really want to go in with open eyes and ears as well, so that we can be engaging with the local communities there, and also kind of learning and understanding
Hmm.
about what is going on the ground. Because you can only
Yeah.
understand so much, right? When you talk to people over video calls, when you have calls, when you read up online, it can be vastly different when you actually land in the country. Go to meetings, see the offices, see the innovation centres, talk to the government, talk to the
Yes.
regulators. So, yeah, we do need to do that, and we're actively doing that. I've travelled around the region extensively this year
Yes.
since we said at the show. I've been in Thailand well, earlier part of the year. I was there kind of every 4 to 5 weeks, meeting with all the key officials and partners. I'll be in Beijing later this year as well to have a kind of
Yeah.
a similar trip, and the rest of the team are doing the same. So, we're also you've got to be. I mean, that it's the nature of the beast. I think being in Asia, because as we mentioned earlier, each country is so different, and
Yeah.
even each city can be different within countries here. So you've got to be out there and talking and interested and curious about what's going on. Otherwise, you're only going to be
Hmm.
looking at things through your lens, right? And the
Yeah.
risk is that then you can become skewed. And again, as I mentioned earlier, fintech's so broad, right? So we've got to
Exactly.
make sure that we have a balanced show that's representative of the region. And the only way to do that is to be ingrained and talking to the region. So yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. To your point, it's a key focus for us,
Yeah.
and elsewhere as well in Europe, it's the same. So they go into all the different fintech hubs, and the same in America, to make sure that they've got their finger on the pulse, and the show really does sit at the heart of the industry, right? So I mean, it's changed people's trajectory in their careers coming to Money 2020. So we have a big role to play, and we take that very seriously.
Yeah. Awesome. That's good to get more insight on the show and on your views on finance. But let's talk a little bit about you, and about
Yeah.
your background and your mindset and things like that, because I'm sure there'll be people out there, thinking about, their career path and how they want to end up
Hmm.
doing, what I honestly believe is a pretty cool job, traveling around the regions, like learning all the time, learning new things. I mean, there's no room for just sitting there and being like, yeah, I know it all. Like, I feel like you must be learning all the time. So
Hmm.
do you think it's important to always have that open-minded view or that lifelong learning mindset in the finance world, or just in any industry, even as a leader for many years?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think you've always got to be, and no matter where you are in your career, because I think at the beginning of your career, when you're coming in, you're new, right? So
Hmm.
you should be going in with that kind of beginner mindset, that kind of white belt mindset, where you've got to absorb everything and
Yes.
learn from the people around you. And I had the benefit. I'm sure you were the same, Ranvir, of starting in a when you were new in a company where you're in the office, right? Which can be different now since the pandemic. It can be
Hmm.
remote working for many people, but when
Hmm.
I started, I learned a lot from formal training and from kind of listening to people that were more senior in kind of private sessions. But to be honest, I learned the most just by sitting in the office, listening to other people on calls, observing other people, attending meetings with people that were ahead of me in my career,
Yeah.
and just kind of watching and observing how they did things and how they operated and their body language. And I think to your point, when we then progress in our career, we sometimes lose that beginner kind of mindset, right? That always learning mindset, because we tend to feel like, oh well, we've already mastered that area, and so I
Yeah.
don't really need to go back to that. And actually, that's a shame. So I spoke to a gentleman a few years ago on my podcast, and he spoke about reverse mentoring, which I thought was really interesting. Where
Okay.
um, if you're a senior executive, maybe there's someone newer in the business or fresh grad or someone that's been there a few years, and actually they mentor you. So they talk to you about their experiences and how maybe they view
Okay.
the world and how they view the business, because it's all about perception, right? They're going to have a very different perception to you, and obviously you've got to be humble enough to be able
I
to
was just
do
gonna
that.
say. I was gonna say that.
But I think it opens your eyes, and again, we do become very siloed, right, as we work, and we miss things, especially as you become more senior. You get a bit more removed. I think it's Simon Sinek, right, talks about the tree of monkeys. So
Yeah.
if you're at the top of the tree looking down, you only see smiles. But if you're at the bottom of the tree looking up, you obviously see the monkey's bums. So it's
Yes.
around, what is the real information, the real data I have to get. And um, one mistake I've seen people make as well with newer hires, where it hasn't worked out always, is that maybe they join the business and they're not willing to unlearn what they've already learned. So
Okay.
because they've been trained or it's worked for them in one way, maybe at a previous company, they think that they can just kind of replicate that and get the same level of success.
Hmm.
And maybe if it doesn't work out, because all companies are different, right? Companies are different, they have different ways of working, the
Yeah.
product is different. So it doesn't matter how experienced you are, you've got to be able to come in and you've got to be willing to take on new advice, new recommendations, study up on a new industry, be humble, be talking to customers, getting that feedback, learning from those around you. There might be people that aren't on paper as senior as you are, but that humbleness is so key. And
Hmm.
if you're not willing to do that, that can be a real block, real blockage in your career, right? Especially now with the advent of technology, right? I mean,
Yes, definitely.
it can be it can mean that if you are senior, you've still got to be able to understand and be on the pulse of how that can change your industry or how that can change your career. So yeah, I mean, it's a real. It sounds simple, but it's a real difference maker
Yeah.
if you're always learning. And I think as well, it's not just about reading and training and listening to others. It's about when you're going into interactions with others. Maybe you're a senior manager and you're doing your kind of team one-to-ones or you're in your team meetings.
Yeah.
Make sure that you put the onus on them, right? You want to understand where they're coming from, what they're doing, challenges they're
Mm.
facing, and where you can help them. Because again, if you're the one doing all of the talking, you're not learning. So I think it's just it's the structured learning, but it's also listening and helping
Yeah.
your team, and being able to spend your time on where you add the most value. I think is crucial, because that can be very difficult when
Mm.
you're in a kind of multidisciplined role and across lots of different areas and functions. Yeah, where
Yeah.
do I really add the most value? You need to learn that from your team sometimes. Ask them.
Definitely. I
Yeah.
think that's definitely like a fatal flaw of a lot of leaders out there is that either they get so caught up in what they're doing and they don't
Mm,
branch out and think about the actual people factor of the business, and they get,
yeah.
they're so dialed in onto the actual um, you know, daily workings, or as you said, sometimes they're just not humble enough to, be like, look, I know I'm here. I've been working for 15, 20,
Mm.
30 years, whatever it is. But at the same time, there's, these newer people in the industry that know different things from me or know certain technologies maybe better than I do. And yeah, having that openness and willingness to learn is definitely, important. Yeah, I totally
It really
agree with
is,
that.
yeah, it really is. And it makes a difference to the people working around you, because
Hmm.
if they feel like they're working for someone that never listens, never takes their point of view on board, um, that's demotivating. That's very demotivating. Everyone
Hmm.
wants to feel heard and wants to feel valued. So, yeah, as a leader, it's absolutely crucial that you foster that environment and that culture.
Yeah, yeah. And I think another thing as well that makes, lifelong learning a very important thing at the leadership level is it also leads to experiencing growth,
Hmm.
which I don't think that leaders at that level think is still possible. It's like you've worked for so long, it's like, okay, I think I've grown enough now, right? Because I think psychologists say like your personality develops and you are who you are at 29, but people change after that,
Hmm.
right? And there's still so much to learn. There's still so much that you can absorb. So as long as you open your mind and you can always have that experience of a growth mindset, and maybe it also helps with mentoring others and that people side of leadership, right? So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've again in my career, I've always tried to find kind of mentors. I would say that I'm not a very extroverted person, so
Right.
my network is smaller, but I would say I would have the deeper relationships with the people that are then in that network. And
Yeah.
there's a handful of people I would definitely say through my career have acted as mentors who I still speak with regularly on a kind of weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Okay.
I think earlier in your career, um, it's really important. Well, what I would say is that you've got to be kind of providing something back, though, right? If it's all take, take, take,
Hmm.
maybe it wouldn't last for forever. But I think it's really important, and you don't even have to kind of formalize it sometimes. Or I would never kind of say you're my mentor, but
Yeah.
there were definitely people that I always thought were maybe 5, 10 years ahead of where I was again, and would like to be in that time period. So
Yeah.
ahead of me in my career, and that I could learn from and bounce ideas from, and also someone that wouldn't judge me as well. So it's like a safe space, right? You can talk about the gory details and the things that aren't going well and what you're frustrated with, and they'll give
Yeah.
you the feedback, and sometimes even you just need to get it off your chest and kind of have a laugh about it, right? I look back to the days during the pandemic. There were some difficult days there, and
Yeah.
again, these types of people were just people that were there that you could kind of share those kind of difficult moments with, and move forward then with a bit of confidence. So I think mentors are really important again, and there's a lot of coaches out there as well, right? So you can pay for a mentor. I think we're very
Yeah.
happy to pay for lots of different things, technology, going out to eat,
Yes.
but we don't invest in our own self-learning. So
Yeah.
again, if you can find the right coach and the right person to develop you and push you on in your career, then that's money well spent. So
Definitely.
I think it's undervalued, or in terms of mentorship, and often all you need to do as well is again be humble enough. But back to what we were talking about before, be humble enough to ask. Reach out to someone and say, "Do you know what? I think you're someone I'd like to talk to a little bit more. Would you mind if we spent an hour every week?" And maybe that person's already in your network, and I'm sure you'd be happy to sit down and to offer some advice and support. But not many people actually make the ask. So, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're unsure, just ask somebody. What's the worst
Yeah.
that can happen, right? They'll say no. Then ask somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's what I said on one of my earlier episodes as well. Like one of my mantras in life is just go for it, right?
yeah,
You don't know. If you don't go for it, you're at zero. At least if you ask, you have an answer. And if they say yes, great. If they say no, then, well, no. So
yeah.
at least you've gone for it. It's not like, oh, will they, won't they, So,
Exactly. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. And you learn a lot while you're going for it as well. You know,
definitely.
it's you'll never know unless you make that ask. So yeah, it's always
Exactly.
worth making the ask.
Yeah. And so before I wrap up, this episode and this great show. I'm sure that there are many people early in their careers, young in their careers, that would dream to have a career like yours and to be doing what you're doing. So, is there one piece of advice that you want to share specifically to early career or fresh grad individuals that has helped you or you think that will help them?
I would just say, if I look back to my early career, I said yes to every opportunity that came along, even if I didn't always know how I was going to do it or if it was the right move. I think in your early career, you've got the opportunity to take a lot more risk, right? You're
Hmm.
not tied down to probably a marriage, probably a mortgage, children at that point, all things that I now have. So you can say yes to opportunities. And was I ready when I moved out to Singapore to manage a company? I mean, it was nerve wracking, to be honest with you, but I just went for it, and good things have happened as a result. And I said yes to other opportunities that have come along since then. And I just think that don't overthink things sometimes. If maybe have a small checklist, but if it seems like a good opportunity to you,
Hmm.
and if it seems like something where later in your career you would look back. So, for example, when we moved to Singapore, um, it was like, should we stay in London with everyone we know? We're
Yeah,
settled here, family are close, or should we move halfway around the world to Singapore, this country we don't know, live in Asia? We've not really been there. I think we'd been there once at that point. And
right.
it came down to the fact, like, later in our career when we retire, are we going to look back and think, what a great decision? We didn't go to Singapore.
Yeah.
Or are we actually going to say, do you know what, we should have probably gone at that point? So just things like that. I think, um, yeah, if an opportunity presents itself, say yes and keep saying yes, because good things generally happen, and you can figure it out on the way. That would be my big piece of advice. And again, um, the cliche one, which is around a lot, but it's so true. Even if you say yes and it doesn't work out,
Hmm.
and again, that's happened to me. I've said yes to things. Maybe I was a bit naive and it hasn't worked out. The
Yeah.
learnings and the experiences and maybe going through difficult moments, again, that's improved me as a person, right? It's given me the
Yes.
skills to then go on to the next thing and prepare me to do that, right? To run worldwide business research for 10 years, to go on to Money 2020. Again, that was because of all the experiences I'd already had at that point. So
Yeah.
if you're not open to opportunities, you're not pushing yourself forward. You're not out of your comfort zone, and you might end up finding that you get stuck. So early in your
Right.
career, I'd say just go for it.
And with that, we will wrap up the show. So thank you, Danny, for your time. Again, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure that all the listeners are going to be excited, not just about Money 2020, but also about some of the wisdoms that you have imparted here today.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, Ranvir. I really appreciate it for having me on. And yeah, you're doing something really good with this podcast. So keep it going.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, we can
Yeah.
come back and do another one at some point.
You know where I am.
Yes. Well, thank you, Danny. Have a good one.
Thanks, Ranvir. Speak soon.